How's everybody doing? In this video, we're going to talk about how nerves conduct signals throughout the body. Right? If you remember from our discussion on the anatomy of a nerve, the nerve has a body surrounded by dendrites, and then they usually have a long tail called the axon, and that long tail comes out and it ends in very close proximity to the dendrites of the next nerve. And there is a gap that's in between the axon of one nerve and the dendrites of another. And that gap is called the synapse. And that synapse is very important. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. First, how do we get this nerve to fire? Okay, if we take, this is my nerve right here. Here's the body of my nerve, and here's the axon right here. If we were to stimulate that nerve, like here's a needle, I'm gonna poke that nerve. Okay, then I'm gonna poke that nerve. It's gonna cause a reaction inside of that cell. And that reaction is gonna spread throughout the entire cell, and that's what's gonna help to propagate the signal. Now, in order to explain the reaction, I thought the best place to be was around a bunch of bamboo, because of course, every time you see bamboo, you think of nerve cells, right? I mean, it's just, I guess it's just me. Okay, so let me show you why nerve cells make me think of bamboo. All right, I got a little piece of bamboo right here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split this bamboo open, because as you know, bamboo is hollow. So if I can split this open, don't try this at home. Here we go, let's try it. I'm trying it at my daughter's home. How about that? If I can get my knife in there, there it goes. Ha ha ha. If I can split it open. Ha ha. Ta-da. Woo. Don't need that piece. That's the piece I need. The reason that this works is because bamboo is beautifully hollow. You see that? It's beautifully hollow. This is like what a nerve cell is like. Okay? You have an outside, then you have inside the cell right here, and it's really long. Okay? The way that a nerve cell works is it works on what's called the sodium-potassium pump. There's other cells that have this, like muscles and things, but the nerve is where we're going to study this. The sodium-potassium pump. We have sodium ions that line up on the outside in high concentration on the outside, and we have potassium ions that line up on the inside, fill the inside. So we have a high concentration of potassium and a high concentration of sodium. Now, it takes energy to keep these two things separate. Remember, everything in nature likes to go from high concentration to low, from high altitude to low, from high pressure to low. That's the way things move, right? You don't dump out a bucket of water and it flows uphill. You dump out a bucket of water and it flows downhill because it goes from high to low. Everything goes from high to low. Okay, so we have high concentration out here of sodium, high concentration of potassium inside the cell, right here, okay? When a nerve gets stimulated, so I'm gonna stimulate the nerve, okay? Ha-ha, ha-ha, ah! That was pretty violent, I shouldn't do that, okay, all right. So I'm gonna stimulate the nerve cell, I'm gonna come in, and I'm gonna touch that nerve cell, boom, and I'm gonna stimulate. What happens at the point of contact is you have a collapse of that system. The energy that's being used to keep the sodium on the outside and the potassium on the inside collapses, it breaks down, and a little gate right there, right where it was stimulated, that little gate opens up and it allows the potassium to flow in high to low, and the sodium to flow in from high to low, and the potassium to flow out from high to low. And as soon as that happens, that causes the gates next to it to collapse and do the same thing. And that causes the gates next to them to collapse and do the same thing. In the meantime, while all those gates are collapsing and that exchange of sodium and potassium is going on, spreading both ways down that nerve, where it originally started, we've got the pump acting to push all of the sodium back out and draw all the potassium back in and reset up that high concentration of sodium and high concentration of potassium. So that literally sends this cascading signal of that exchange of sodium in and pump back out, of potassium out and pump back in, and that just spreads like throwing a stone in a pond. Those ripples, it literally spreads like ripples all the way down to the ends of the nerve cell. And that's the function, that's what carries this thing on. Now, nerves are one-way signals. They will only propagate a signal in one direction, and that's really, really, really important. That's really good. See, if nerves went in all directions, then if you happen to step on like a little thumbtack or a little piece of glass or a sand spur or touch a thorn, your whole body would light up because the nerve signals would go in all directions and everything would feel like it hurts. That would be really bad. So instead, the nerves are unidirectional. They're only going to go one way. Now, I know what you're thinking, Mr. Thompson, but you said that once you stimulate that nerve cell, that thing's going to go in both directions. Yes, it is in an individual nerve cell. However, when that signal comes down here to the body and it hits the dendrites of the nerve cell, it stops at the end of the dendrites. When it comes this direction down here and it hits the axon, there are chemicals in the end of that axon. There's chemicals there called neurotransmitters. Acetylcholine is one of these, and that chemical will leave the axon, go across the synapse. So if like here's the end of the axon, and here's the next nerve right here, it will go across that gap just like that, and those chemicals, the neurotransmitters that leave the axon, will begin to attach onto that dendrite. When enough of them have attached onto that dendrite, it will cause this dendrite to begin to fire. In other words, the sodium on the outside of this dendrite goes in and the potassium pumps out, and it starts that whole chain reaction that we just saw with this one, and it will carry from that nerve, and then that nerve right here that it goes into will then pick up that signal and keep going. So this is kind of the way that we're going to travel. So the nerves are only going to act unidirectionally. You know, you have those two sets of nerves, remember, from the anatomy of the nervous system. We've got two sets of nerves that we're dealing with. We have the sensory nerves, which are from our body. They carry messages from your body, remember, back to your brain, and it reports to your brain and tells you what's going on. Okay, so you've got your sense of touch, your sense of smell, taste, sense of sight, sense of hearing, and these are all picking up all these different signals and you're telling your brain what's going on. And then your brain then responds by sending signals out through the motor nerves to tell the body what to do in response to what the sensory nerves are telling the brain what's going on. So if the sensory nerves say, hey, I'm looking at a street and there's this picture of this truck in the street, and that truck is continually getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and everything in the street is staying the same size. Well, your brain says, gosh, that probably means the truck is coming at you. So then your brain has to then process that and figure out, well, I better tell the legs to move the body out of the way. And those signals are always going on inside of your body, constantly going on. The only thing that you don't have to think about are things called reflexes. Now, a reflex is a signal that skips going to the brain. Have you ever, for instance, put your hand like accidentally on something hot, a hot stove or something else? Maybe you got too close to a campfire. Maybe you stepped on something sharp. Anyway, so you reach out and you touch that hot thing. So you reach out and here's this hot thing right here, right? Maybe it's a spoon, and you reach out and you touch it. And as soon as you touch it, you go, ooh, and you pull your hand back. But if you think about it, you yank your hand back and then you feel the pain in your fingers. Are you with me? All right, don't go and touch something hot to see if this works. Okay, promise, you promise? Don't do that, that's bad. All right, so you touch something hot, your hand yanks off automatically, and then you feel the pain. You step on something sharp and your foot yanks up, and then you feel the pain. What's going on with that? Okay, this is what, if I'm putting my hand on something hot, I want to get my hand off as fast as possible. I don't want that signal to go up my arm to my spine, up my spine to my brain, up here to process, hey, my hand's on fire, I better move it and send the signal back down to my muscles and then have my hand yank off. I don't want to have to do that. So God has designed you with the ability to short circuit that thought process, and it's called the Reflex Arc, and it's really cool. So if I touch my hand on something hot, then what's actually happening is as I touch it, the signal goes to my spine and it connects back up immediately through what's called an interneuron. It connects back up to the motor neurons responsible for moving my arm, and it sends the signal back to my arm to yank my hand away. So I don't have to think about it. It's automatic. And then the signal goes the rest of the way to my brain, almost as if it wants to report to the brain what just happened. The brain's like, what the heck? You know, the arm just all of a sudden flew out of on its own, or so. That's crazy. And your body's going, no. Hands like, no. See, I was on fire. And so the arm saved me. That's a good thing. That's called the reflex arc. You don't think about it. The signal's short-circuited. You don't have to process it. Goes from wherever it's being hurt to your spine, back to the muscles, yank it, get it out of danger. Then the report gets sent to your brain and tells you what's going on. So this is how the nerve is propagated, the nerve signal. When it's stimulated, you have potassium on the inside that flows out, sodium on the outside that flows in. It's immediately ATP is used to pump that back into those concentrations, but that collapse of those gates and that inflow of sodium and outflow of potassium, and then the flow back in, the switching of that, propagates that signal down the nerves. When that signal gets to the end of the axon, neurotransmitters are released into the synapse that will flood across the synapse, and they will connect up with the dendrite that's on the next nerve. And when enough of them attach, it will cause that signal, that nerve, to begin to propagate that signal, and the signal will carry on.